This episode is brought to you by the PowerMonkey Training app. Now, out of all of the cool things that we do with PowerMonkey, whether that be our camps, or our retreats, or in-person events, the thing that I'm most excited about and our team is most excited about is our new PowerMonkey Training app. The new one will have a complete redesign and a lot of cool new features that you haven't been able to access yet. There's really 4 categories of training skills depending on who you are as an athlete. The first one is probably the one that you're most familiar with, are skill plans. How do you learn a strict pull-up, a handstand, a muscle-up? They're all assessment-based. We put you into the correct level according to what your starting point is, and you build plans from there. The couple new ones that we're really excited about, one is our volume plan. So volume plans will be based for those athletes that are learning capacity around skill-specific training. So if you're an athlete out there looking to take that one muscle up and build it into 3, 5, 10, 20, and beyond, we have a plan to help build capacity around skill-specific training. Very, very unique, very different, something that we're new offering, really excited about. Additionally, we have our GPP plan for gymnastics. We call it our monkey method plan. This is a well-rounded gymnastics plan that you can be accessing on a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level. Beginner and intermediate are 3 days a week. Our advanced is up to 6 days a week. You'll be doing handstands, mobility, core work, bar, ring. It's a well-rounded plan around becoming more capable and confident around gymnastics movements. Our last types of plans will be our 365 plans, and these are bite-sized plans that can be incorporated into any training plan, starting with our core 365, something that's been in the app for a while, but a new feature is that we're going to be putting up one workout a day for free on the app. All you need to do is download and register, and you will get a free workout every single day that is core specific, between 5 and 10 minutes long, that you can incorporate into your training. It's a great starting point, and there'll be more of these 365 plans that help create a more well-rounded training experience. Come train with us with the PowerMonkey Training app. We think you guys are going to love it. Welcome to the PowerMonkey podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Mike Service, and on today's episode, we have Carl Paoli. Carl has been around the community for well over a decade, having been one of the initial great gymnastics resources for those CrossFit athletes and for the functional fitness community. He grew up in Spain, having been a high-level gymnast out there, and then came to the States and helped to coach and bring his techniques to the masses. He's also a New York Times bestseller, having created one of the more important books on gymnastics movement within the community called Freestyle. Highly recommend checking that if you haven't already. And he's since transitioned a little bit away from this gymnastics coaching into being more of a lifestyle coach. We talk about what that transition was like, what it was like starting out at the hub that was San Francisco CrossFit back in the day and making a name for himself as a gymnastics coach in the community, what he's doing now, some of the incredible obstacles that he's had to overcome, and what he sees next for himself in the future. Love talking with Carl. I was lucky enough to meet him over a decade ago, and we became friends, and I always respected his perspective on things, and I hope you guys enjoy this one as well. All right. Well, Carl, what's up, man? Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. We were just kind of talking off air that the last time we interacted professionally was at this like weird round table we did at CrossFit HQ, and we're like, let's forget about that and let's make this one better.
That was close to probably 10 years ago now. That
was such a weird thing.
Yeah. It was I don't know, about kipping pull-ups or something. Are they valid? Are they not? Whatever it was. But I think we've come a long way in terms of where we are now. So I'm happy to restart the discussion.
Yeah,
Dave,
me too.
Was this the same roundtable that Dan Pope came to?
Yeah, it was.
Amazing.
And that's where we met Pope for the first time. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what we ended up recording this thing, I think it was like 3 or 4 times. And the first one I was like, oh, that was great. I feel like we really met each other in the middle. We said something of value. And then they're like, no, let's do it again. So you guys get kind of aggressive.
Yeah, starting to devolve really quickly.
I'm just like, get me out of here, man. This is insane.
That sounds how it was described by Pope too. I remember he goes, yeah, they made it sound to me like we're going to come in and it's going to be like this huge fight. And then Dave and I got along really well. And that's how I ended up like joining PowerMonkey, because we agreed on so many health and wellness principles.
Yeah, it was. And I always felt like me and you got along really well. You know what I mean? Like, for the listeners out there, I would like to give a little background, because, you've taken a step back a little bit from the CrossFit space, but you were such an important figure early on when it came to good quality gymnastics movement, giving technical advice around how people should be moving well, and it expanded well beyond just gymnastics. But I always looked at you as a voice that was really critical in those early stages to kind of be a voice of reason. And when it came to understanding how to do things technically sound, I'm curious if you're willing to go into a little bit of how I was just on the Ready State podcast a couple of days ago with Kelly and Juliet, and your name came up and talking about how you got started in such a hub of the CrossFit scene at San Francisco CrossFit. There were so many great minds all in one space. It kind of just worked out well. Can you give us a little insight in how you connected with Kelly and how that kind of got started for you?
Of course. Yeah, when I got into CrossFit, I got in because somebody approached me at a gym that I was doing personal training at and said, "Hey, are you doing CrossFit?" I'm like, "No, I'm just doing gymnastics, applied fitness." And he's like, "Oh, it looks like CrossFit." I was like, "Oh, what's CrossFit?" He's like, "Oh, you should check it out." And I just kind of looked up CrossFit and I found San Francisco CrossFit, went there, took a class. Kelly was teaching. And I'm like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And what I ended up doing at first was I started stealing every single workout that we did at the gym at San Francisco CrossFit. And I was like, I applied it to every single client I had the next day. And my clients are like, "Oh, wow, you're really killing it with the programming." I'm like, "I know, I'm a genius." It's amazing. But that's how I got started. I was a member first, and then Kelly asked if I wanted to join, and I said, "Yeah, I would love to join the team." And I did, and I just started learning, and I quickly realized that in CrossFit, the gymnastics that was being spoken of wasn't artistic gymnastics. It was just calisthenics, basically applied to CrossFit, and that was called gymnastics because Greg Glassman, of course, growing up as a gymnast, had incorporated it into one of the fundamental principles of the program. And I realized quickly, just kind of looking up where the gymnastics voices were within the space, that at that time was Roger Harrell. It was more having gymnastics as something that was recreational, and it felt like almost like this aside. It wasn't integrated in the program. It was kind of like, oh, you go to this special space and you do these little moves that are artistic gymnastics based, and hopefully that makes you better in terms of your body awareness to apply it to your fitness program called CrossFit. And then there was a big accident and the whole fallout that happened with Roger Harrell. And then came Jeff Tucker, and he kind of like, caught the CrossFit gymnastics thing. And I don't know enough about Jeff Tucker to speak with authority on his background, but I think he had more of a cheerleading background when it came to developing people, but he was able to bring in some really solid fundamentals. And I saw a big shift happening in the CrossFit space when it came to gymnastics at that time. And at that point, it just hit me that if I was going to be in the CrossFit space and speaking about gymnastics to some degree, I couldn't talk about artistic gymnastics. It had to be applied gymnastics. And for that to happen effectively within the CrossFit space, I had to see gymnastics from a CrossFit perspective first, and then a gymnastics perspective second, as a way of accessorizing and supercharging and facilitating the growth of gymnastics within CrossFit. And then a few years went by, and of course I was creating content, and a lot of it influenced by how Kelly Starrett was thinking at the time, which was, one, take care of yourself. Two, there are some simple accessory pieces that you can do in terms of mobility to give you access to new ranges of motion, develop a greater strength at multiple levels, and then be able to apply that strength in a way that allows you to complete the task at hand. Yeah, then you showed up, and I was like, yes, this is good, because in my eyes, although I did the fundamentals of gymnastics, I kind of went through the national circuit in Spain, I never made it further than that. And yes, I got to, meet the national team in Spain and train with them, and I went to camps together, and I know everybody there. I was never the guy, so to speak. I was never the athlete. But when you came in, I was like, okay, now we have somebody in the space who's kind of done it, has been through the whole progression. And I don't know, I just found that to be very exciting. And this may come off a little wrong, but I was like, I think I can finally retire and not have to talk about gymnastics anymore. I can talk about something else that I'm maybe more interested in. Anyways, that's a little bit of my come up within CrossFit, and where I am right now, we can dive into.
Yeah, I mean, well, I appreciate the rundown there. And it seemed like when freestyle came out and everything, it always seemed like you had an inkling or a love for just movement in general outside of gymnastics. And that was maybe a base to allow you to understand how movement could open up new ways of thinking and new ways of approaching how to be applied to maybe CrossFit as a tool, but not really an end game. It was just another avenue for you to be able to explore. And it seems like that exploration took you in a lot of different areas and a lot of different routes, fitness related and non-fitness related. But what were the things in the fitness space that really got you excited once, maybe that CrossFit piece of it did retire, or you started to kind of delve into some other areas? What kind of took hold once that was over?
There's so many layers there, but when it came to the fitness aspect of CrossFit, I was just very excited to see that people wanted to approach things from a more chaotic perspective first, meaning allowing their body to move first, and then in retrospect, noticing what did my body do, what worked, what didn't work, and how can I work with what worked and I didn't know would work, and how can I create new things? That was what I was most excited about. And that's kind of how Freestyle came about, actually, the book and everything, was because I got this opportunity through Kelly Starrett to write a book, and they asked me to write a gymnastics book applied to functional fitness. Of course, you weren't allowed to call it CrossFit for legal reasons. And when I started writing it, I'm like, I just don't see myself as a gymnastics coach. I don't feel like I have the expertise and authority to talk about it, but I do like to talk about how we arrive at certain conclusions, how gymnastics, for example, arrived at these elements, why we use this code and why it's competed in this way, and how maybe the progressions that we've seen in one sport can apply to another sport, and to create that bridge between the two. That's what really excited me. And what I found was that when you could look at movement from a transition position, not a start, not a finish, not the complete movement, but just from a transition position, there you found the bridges that allowed you to create universal prescriptions. And these universal prescriptions, when casted out into the world and tested on people, would create individualized prescriptions. And it was the language that allowed you to go from universal prescriptions, this is GPP, into individualized prescriptions, which is what do you as an individual need to do to improve your fitness, your performance, or whatever it is that you're setting out to do. That's what got me fired up. And I dedicated a lot of my time to that. And as you can maybe hear just from me speaking right now, what that ends up doing is that although you're looking at movement from like this engineering mechanical perspective, it requires you to work with the mind and the emotions to get that individualized application. And that is when I started really shifting from physical fitness to more emotional fitness, that I call it now, which is defined by myself, the ability to move into a state of being that translates into purposeful action. I think, and that's the key. It's purposeful action. Is why are you doing this? And now how do we find a path to fulfill that purpose?
That transition seems like such a key component. I really like that. And obviously everyone is different there. That's where you create that individualization around it. It seems like it requires, and something that we talk a lot about, athlete ownership, right? It requires a pretty high level of understanding for the person internally to understand what they were trying to do or where they're emotionally trying to go. So for you as a coach, you can kind of lead them and say, this is what I'm seeing, but it requires you to take that next step, to internally say, I'm understanding where the issue is. How do I make that transition? Is that correct from your end, that it's a two-way street, that it's much about you presenting the idea as it is about them accepting and understanding.
100%. And there are two things that are coming up for me. It's on one end, as a coach, it's learning to meet people where they're at. And this is very obvious and cliche, but the way that I like to look at it is I think about every student or every person that I'm coaching to be in one of three phases. They're either in the child development stage, in the teenage stage, or in the adult stage. The child is the one that needs guidance. You need to handhold them. You need to tie their shoes. You need to do everything for them. It's kind of like dealing with a toddler. And that's one level. Then the next stage is the teenager. They're the ones that are self-sufficient. They know how to do things, and they just want to venture out on their own and explore. These are the typical people that you maybe work with, are like, hey, when is open gym? Or, you know, maybe I should try that programming over there. I think they know what they're doing. That's the teenager. And then you have the adult, and the adult is the one that wants to truly collaborate with you and build with you. Either way, they are all autonomous, but the way that they express their autonomy is different. And I think that's the relationship piece. Then in terms of taking full ownership of your practice, this is kind of like the Daniel Pink idea, like he writes about in his book Drive, which is, in order to motivate somebody or encourage somebody to develop, they need three things. One, they need autonomy, which is to be self-directed. Two, they need mastery, which is not a destination, but rather a process that you adhere to. That's the infinite practice, so to speak. And then they need a purpose, and that's the reason for doing it. And the reason for doing it is always interesting, because there's the emotional side, there's the intellectual side, and then there's the physical side. And knowing how to branch those three into one is, I think, the key for really arriving at that place of taking full ownership of your practice, or what it is that you're trying to develop physically, mentally, and emotionally.
I'm
Mike, I feel like I'm just gonna finish out the conversation here. I want you to jump in, otherwise it's gonna be all me for this one.
Yeah, Carl, if we do too many screen clips, people just see me like gazing and smiling, but it's just bringing so many thoughts into my mind, and like little words that you're saying are connecting really nicely. But of course, Dave and I will appreciate all of this in terms of the interpersonal relationships and individualizing. But, you know, these terms like ownership and purpose, all the things that come up so often, I think, internally in our conversations about why we do what we do, and why, you know, after 10 plus years in the space of fitness, we still find ourselves here. Is we're still kind of attached to a lot of these concepts. And then, I think one thing that kind of struck me when you're talking about all this is it seems like you like to empathize not just with people, but with these ideas and situations as well. So you're not handcuffing yourself to anything, which is, I think, why you maybe felt that relief when you left the self-appointed, I have to teach gymnastics to everybody. Okay, great. Here's somebody else. I'll pass it so that, you know, I can continue on my path. And I'm just babbling a little bit, but I'm also rephrasing everything that you're saying in my mind to think of where I want to go with this.
Yeah, I mean, you put it really nicely when it comes to like empathy towards ideas or concepts or people. Like I'm a people fan. I just enjoy watching people succeed. I mean, you know, there's I don't know if you've ever seen on Netflix, like Last Chance at You. It's like a basketball program, junior college basketball program. Yeah. Anyways, I'm like crying all the time. Like, yes, come on, you can do it. And I'm intrigued by the process of getting better. Like what does that look like? And a sense that I have is that I want to live in that student mindset. Sometimes it's because I like to hide behind it. It's good to be a student, because that way you're not accountable to having to lead. That's kind of nice. But at the same time, it's when I feel like I'm a student where I do my best work. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, Dave. When you showed up in the scene, I was like, okay, I think now we're going to hear something just slightly different that we need to hear. and a person who has certain experience and pedigree comes in and says that, those words carry weight. And I was ready to like, come on, tell me what I don't know, which is something that maybe in the past I was not getting, because in the scene I wasn't finding that information. And I have a love for that. And when it comes to, you know, empathy, just when we talk about interpersonal relationships and kind of now regressing to this idea of ownership and having relationship with your athletes, empathy has three expressions. You have emotional empathy, which is when you feel the emotions of somebody else and you actually express them physically. This is what happens when, you know, when I'm watching Netflix and I'm watching some amazing show and I'm falling in love with the character, and let's say the character is scared, I get scared. When the character cries, I cry, and so on. That's the emotional empathy. Then you have the cognitive empathy, and cognitive empathy is the empathy where you understand what somebody is feeling, but it's cold, it's ice cold, and it's just in your head. You just know what it is, and your expression is one that feels a little disconnected. And there's a place for that, but sometimes you need to have a combination of the two, the emotional empathy and the cognitive empathy. And that's the one that shows up as the third expression of empathy, which is compassionate empathy, which is being able to understand what somebody is feeling, allow that feeling to kind of enter your body, but not for it to express itself physiologically. So just for people listening, to add some clarity to this, a feeling is actually a mental concept. An emotion is the embodiment of that concept. And the embodiment is when your physiology changes so that you can express yourself with purpose. And this is something that I recommend every coach to read, is Lisa Feldman Barrett's book, How Emotions Are Made, which basically explains how emotions work in our body to allow us to perform better. And when we get to know how our emotions work, we can make great changes. And this idea of empathy when it comes to coaching, especially compassionate empathy, is key, because that's what allows you to move towards one another as athlete-coach relationship and build together. But the most important empathy is compassionate empathy with yourself. It's now being able to connect with yourself, your practice, and what your practice is bringing up for you. And I think when you can allow your physical practice or your physical development, your just curiosity, need for developing yourself as a way of self-developing, you don't get trapped in the pity party, boohoo me, this sucks, and I am sacrificing. Now you're genuinely bought in, you're genuinely connected, and you're making it a lifestyle rather than something that you have to do. That's a roundabout way of just kind of connecting it to this idea of ownership.
Carl, do you think with that, like, I'm thinking about your journey, Dave's journey, my journey, and then this, compassion. As an athlete or as a student, a practitioner, I find it hard from personal experience to see compassion. So like as an athlete, I think I lacked all compassion. Like I probably empathy and compassion. It was more like ego and envy all the time. And balancing those. But I always tell people from my journey, I'm so happy that I became a coach, a teacher, someone that wants to continue to learn, but also share the things that I'm learning, because like I guess the compassion scale just grew immensely. So like wanting to feel what other people were feeling, but also another thing that you were saying, which makes so much sense, even thinking back on some of my coaches, the coaches that were able to feel with me, but not express, like if they were nervous because I was nervous, or if I did really good, so they were like way too excited that I did good, or maybe I had failed, so they were super disappointed. Because as an athlete, you ride that roller coaster. And I think you don't understand how to be maybe compassionate your coach in that sense. But I would say, and I would hope probably the three of us are probably still on that, that journey of learning how to best have that, whether it's, interacting with our friends, our family, but then of course, people that are ultimately coming to us to learn. The compassion factor is so interesting. So for me, I'm just curious, do you find yourself, when you step out of that student role and into the teacher role, do you find you're kind of sharpening your compassion axe in that moment where you're more able to embrace that?
Yeah, I think it lives in both places. But one of the things that you made me think about is the difference between development and competition.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm competing, I want to kill you. It's like, I'm not here to take second place. I'm here to win.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm thinking of some past conversations we've had with people too. I think there's a time and a place for that, but when you live in that alley for too long, it's unhealthy. And I've seen maybe coaches and athletes that were there too long that now just despise the sport of CrossFit, despise maybe coach-athlete relationships. They just don't see a value in it. And then I see someone like you who is very refreshing for me, that seems to be looking for ways to nurture these fields and expand upon them, or take your concept of freestyle and just see that maybe it's not one way or the other, but there's a lot of space in between to explore there. Mm-hmm. And Dave, if I'm rambling or not making sense, cut me off and help me out.
You're making a lot of sense, Mike. I always like when you go off on these tangents, the direction that I would never take things. But there are two things that came up there. One, you talked about development, you talked about competition. On the development side, I want to get into that in a second, but on the competitive side, just curious, just the answer that you gave lends itself to think that you still have a fire burning in you when it comes to something that is competitive related, whether that be playing Scrabble or, doing
Monopoly.
handstand, whatever it might be. Yeah, Monopoly, whatever it might be. What do you like to do right now? What kind of, from a competitive standpoint, if it's not CrossFit, if it's not getting in the gym and doing a WOD each day, what do you like to do that kind of keeps that competitive edge kind of in place for you?
Yeah, that's something that I lost a little bit over the pandemic. Was I just didn't have that outlet, and I started just doing hand balancing, and I started improving just my one arm and transitions, and so I was competing with myself. That felt competitive, and then I started getting this like nagging shoulder thing, and I tried to recover it, and then we had a baby at home, and I was carrying the baby with my left arm all the time. And then that didn't make it better. So it just like snowballed into this thing where I was just like, I can't do my handstands or whatever. But any little thing that I do, I always try to say, okay, let's see if I can do it a little different right now. This is a little competitive edge. And just recently, I just started doing this. This is very recent, but I felt this like nudge to want to compete again. And it's not that it was this like super physically challenging thing right off the bat, which is
say pickleball.
I started playing pickleball. Yeah.
Yes. Are you serious? Really?
No. I did. I'm not the good one. My wife is the one that is good. But that was one thing. And then sailing. Somebody recruited me and said, hey, we need crew. Is there any chance you can be on our boat? And I did that. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, I want to beat these people.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. Well, I mean, now we can just talk about pickleball for a little while. It's become like, obviously it's grown so much over the past, whatever, year, 2 years. We started adding it to Power Monkey Camp too. Last camp we put out a court and it became the highlight of camp. So we're going to put 3 courts for all the people listening who are coming in next Power Monkey Camp. We're going to have 3 pickleball courts ready to go so that everyone can make sure they're being competitive throughout the entire day, not just in their fitness sessions all day.
I'm not sure amazing. How, if we would be able to get any sailing going on our lake. Carl, did you
screw sailing? Pickleball is life.
Pickleball's life. Did you run into or interact much with Anna Tunnicliffe when you were in the space?
I didn't.
Okay, I was just curious with the.
We saw her at Wadapalooza for the first time. Yeah, she came through. Hadn't seen her in years and years. And Anna, obviously, an Olympic gold medalist in the sport of sailing, games competitor, just incredible athlete. Like one of the most incredible competitors you'll ever meet in your life. And it was just good to see her out in the scene again at Wadapalooza a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and she's the interesting thing to me is she's back. We're kind of diverging, but that's all right. She's back in sailing a lot now, and I think it's just one of those old tastes that won't go away. And she's so good at it. So that's what she's been doing a ton of now is competing again.
Love it. Well,
yeah, there's something really powerful about being in the elements like that, and reading the wind, reading the currents, watching the other boats, what they're doing, positioning yourself. It's a cool sport.
That's such a great spot for it. You're still in the Bay Area, right? You're still in San Fran?
Yeah, and the wind here is pretty crazy, so you get some.
I used to live with one of the guys on the Stanford sailing team, and we used to take the Stanford boats out, the sailing boats out on weekends, just because he had the keys. So we just go out on the weekends and take the boats out on the water over there. It was amazing.
That is very cool. Very cool.
The development side, and you touched on it, but I was really curious. I actually watched a couple of videos of you initiating or reinitiating this journey with handstands again, and taking on a handstand coach and being a student again. And you talked about how that can be freeing a little bit sometimes, just being the student, not having to be the teacher. What was it like to do that? Because I did the same thing. You know, my handstands are a point of pride and something I really enjoy doing, but I took on a handstand coach as well, and someone that was helping me work on some new variations and understanding how to look at things from different perspectives. I'm curious what that relationship was like, and how that, obviously the injuries and stuff kind of took you away, but what was that initial phase of being a student again, especially with something that you were already proficient with?
Yeah, it sucked. You know, he had me doing like tuck ups and straddle ups, and I'm like, dude, screw this. but I just remember, I'm like, whoa, this is getting kind of hard. And I realized that my mind was just kind of drifting. I was somewhere else, and I could barely finish the program in the beginning. I was about to call him and say, I don't know if I can do this. And when I kind of alluded to the program potentially being too hard, he's like, hey, do you want me to give you the dad version? And I was like, no. give me the real deal.
Give me the real one. It's going to bust my shoulder up, but I want to do
it. Exactly. So, at first it was hard just because I felt like I should be capable of doing something that was so simple and so basic. And the fact that I was struggling with it, and especially mentally, was driving me a little nuts. So I had to really, I mean, this is so cliche, but put my ego in check. And basically what it was just saying, just surrender and assume your position as a student and just do the thing and see what happens when you do it over time. And if nothing's happened, then scrap it. But if something happens, then lean into it and double down on it. And that was the biggest thing. And then the other side is the moment you surrender to a process and you say, look, I'm just going to commit. It's a non-negotiable. I just show up, I do this thing. And then I'm accountable to somebody like a coach. It's very liberating and very freeing because it allows you to just do and not even have to think anymore. You get to shut off that processing side of your being, and that takes up a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's like when you get caught in that conflict, it's like you're watering one part and then the other side is sucking the water right out of it, and nothing can grow from that sense. But I'm thinking selfishly from a coaching standpoint right now, the athletes that seem most at peace and able to let's say get through tough points and then excel are the ones that are able to really surrender is a great word to it, just kind of like surrender to the process, trust the process. Like, and for your circumstance, like you chose that coach for a reason. You obviously had some trust or some curiosity to work with them. My coach that I grew up with used to always say, you know, if you don't trust who you're working with, it doesn't matter how great of the programming that they give you, you'll always be in conflict. So you'll hamper your own progress in that sense.
Yeah. And trust is such a big one. And I think trust goes beyond finding somebody who's competent. You also need them to be extremely consistent and have some sort of track record that shows, oh yeah, this is how they do it, and they do it over and over and over again, and I can really lean into that. It's something that is trustworthy just because of the consistency. And the other thing is, when you work with somebody who has some strong core principles and strengths that they are constantly deploying, whether you believe in them or not at first, just the fact that they're so strong, they become convincing. And I think that's a huge one. And then the being able to find the empowerment that comes from working with a coach, which is not somebody saying, "Oh, you're great." It's just saying, trust. If you're going to trust me, you're going to first have to learn to trust this process. And in the process of trusting the process, you may learn how to trust yourself. And that is when, yeah, you start to actually grow. But to get to that point is very challenging, especially if you see yourself as somebody or someone who is already capable or could do it better or has a better method. But then again, you're seeking out a coach because you want something different. So yeah, what are you going to do?
Well, there's a component in here that we lead into quite a bit, and obviously the CrossFit does, CrossFit world does too, the community aspect. And within Power Monkey, you know, we have a pretty wide-ranging team of experts, and we like to hang out with each other, and it allows each of us to kind of feel like we're recharged, or our minds are refreshed every time that we're together. I'm curious from your perspective, if there's an importance put on community when it comes to how you teach and how you interact with your athletes, and who that community is for you, if that is a source of, what we were discussing here in terms of just a level of importance in how you teach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple of elements on that. I mean, right now for me, I have different groups. I have the groups that, for example, I coach. So I have a group of people that I meet every Monday. We talk about a certain concept, people deploy it, and then we get together. And in that group meeting, we build community by having people interact and taking ownership of their ideas, their process, and so on.
Before you move forward,
yeah.
Is that in person or is that virtual?
That's virtual right now.
Okay.
Right now, everything that I do is virtual. And one of the goals that I have for 2023 is to do some in-person stuff. It just hasn't happened as of yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's like one side. And then I have kind of the communities that I'm in. So I talk to people that are in similar positions as I am in, going through similar things, and I work with them. And basically what we do is, although we are competing with each other, we're also trying to share the best ideas that we have so that we can accelerate the process. And thus, when we get to, the edges of our performance, there we get to say, okay, now here I'm going to show that I potentially have the upper hand. That's where it gets a little exciting. But yeah, community is being able to draft off of one another. And this is something that you can probably relate to, Dave, is in gymnastics, although you can express yourself in team, it's an individual sport. And but you need a team of people to help you level up. The better your surrounding is, the better you get. When you see somebody do something that you can't do, you immediately realize, okay, one, it's possible to do here in this space on that high bar. And now I have a quicker access to it. So leveling up there. So yeah, drafting off of each other is key. And then it's being able to separate the competitive nature from the development that I think is key in community building when it comes to performance communities. One thing is, when you have just supportive communities that are trying to just hold space for one another. But when you're in a performance community, it's slightly different. Because what you're looking for is, one, the nurture, but two, what you're looking for is seeing the room for growth that exists for you. And being able to decouple those requires you to have a universal prescription, which is the community. When you're working with the community, you're kind of managing them, that elicits an individual outcome. And being able to balance those two is, yeah, that's hard, but it's essential. And I haven't figured it out.
Yep.
But if you know how to do it, please tell me, because
No, not at all. I think it's something you keyed in on a few things there. The one that kind of stood out to me was the middle description of community, the one of you working with other people in a similar space as you, that, you know, you're all vying for the top dog within that particular space, but you found the ability to find each other's strengths and lean into them and say, okay, what are you doing well? What are you doing better than me? How can I better my ability to do that through each other? Was that something that happened organically, or did you have to actually seek out people that were willing to expose themselves and open themselves up to work with someone who's in a similar space? It's not always easy to do.
Yeah, it's not easy to do. I didn't seek it out, and I actually don't know why I didn't seek it out. Maybe I was lazy or scared or something. But I'm thinking about last year and this year. I've had a chance to work with break dancers who now are going to the Olympics in Paris.
Paris, first one,
2024.
2024. Yeah.
Yeah, insane. And they've never had a structured program that they follow, and they've never been in a system like this, and not been exposed to a more traditional platform such as the Olympics. So it's very new. But something that I've realized is that bringing competitors together, these are people from different crews that are now going to be working together on Team USA to represent at the Olympics. Just that alone produces a lot of dissonance for athletes. And being able to break that barrier requires some kind of common ground, some kind of common mission. But you can't get people to a common mission unless they have their own personal mission. So that's like number one. We need to understand, what is it that you're trying to do, and how can I help you see that the common goal can get you closer to your own, and vice versa. So that's the one thing. Then when you start talking about technical things, or a technical progression, learning new moves, being able to compete better. Of course, everybody wants to keep some secrets, in their back pocket. But what I've realized is that the more you share those secrets, the faster you become at implementing them. And you realize that no matter how much information people have or technical knowledge they have, physical adaptation, emotional adaptation, cognitive adaptation takes time. Thus, you can still have a competitive advantage, and that puts you in a place of not necessarily safety, but mental and emotional security. And that allowing you to not worry about the stuff that's out of your control, but rather just continue to focus on the things that are in your control. And I think that's part of the nature of deliberately building community with the intention of accelerating a process or achieving a greater goal, such as representing, and for the US especially, in breaking, it was born in the US. So of course they want to go to the Olympics and bring the gold back. But they know that that's a big stretch. Thus, they need to come together even more, and that's the biggest challenge. It's building team, building that culture of common purpose.
It sounds like a movie. Actually reminds me of somebody should film this whole process of this team kind of coming together from different backgrounds and different crews, coming together for a common goal of trying to win that gold medal in Paris. But it sounds like the movie Miracle. These college high school or college hockey players that were going up against the Russians in 80. From BU or from Minnesota, from all different backgrounds, that hated each other off the ice, but had to come together for a common goal. And then the success happened from there. It sounds very, very similar, and a common theme in terms of we may not agree eye to eye on a bunch of things, but we have a common end goal, and how can we assist each other in getting there?
Yeah, I've always said, in fitness, especially, that we're all in convergence, basically. Everybody thinks they have their lane, but at the end of the day, you're trying to accomplish the same thing at a holistic level. It's just your lane for getting there is different. And the sooner you can celebrate that and create an interdisciplinary expression of your fitness, the faster you'll get there. And then once you get there, you'll realize that you never wanted to get there in the first place. You actually like living in the process. You just don't know it.
Absolutely. These are such cool little conversation pieces around, I think, things for me and Mike as coaches to even think about and to think about as part of our team. From a family side, I wanted to touch on this before we get out of here, because I've always seen it on, your posts and everything, but you have kind of an interesting family dynamic, and you're a foster parent. Is that correct?
That's
And
correct.
your daughter is 20 what now? How old is she?
She's 24, going to turn 25, and she has a son who's turning 2 next month, which makes me a 40-year-old grandpa. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love
So
it.
we adopted our daughter when she was 16. So
Uh-huh.
we were foster parents, adopted when she was 16, and she just had a kid 2 years ago, making us grandparents. And he spends 50% of the time here with us. So we're kind of like co-parents, but technically grandparents.
That's incredible. And so the first part of that, you adopted her, and what's her name? What's your daughter's name?
Tanai.
Tanai. So you adopted Tanai when she was 16. And how old were you at the time?
I was then 33.
So 33-year-old taking on a 16-year-old, right? In the middle of those teenage years, probably the hardest years, to go through as a parent. What drove you and your wife to want to embrace that challenge, that part in your life as a early 30-year-old?
Ignorance.
Some would call that open compassion.
Exactly. There you go. I like that. No, so our daughter she came in to do gymnastics at a facility called Acro Sports in San Francisco, which is a recreational gymnastics and performance program for circus and arts. And my wife was coaching her and learned about her backstory, and started mentoring her outside of acro sports and gymnastics, and starting to build a bond with her. And then eventually, because I was traveling so much for work, she started coming over on Fridays when I was out, and they would have dinner at home. And then eventually, because we had an extra bedroom and bathroom, and we had a setup that worked, she started spending some nights, and she could stay with us for 24 hours. And one night we're sitting there on the couch, and she went to bed, and Tanya looked at me, my wife looked at me, and she's like, I think we could do this. And I was like, yeah, that would be pretty crazy if we did. And because we were already falling in love with her and we had this relationship with her, one day we just asked her, would you like to move in here? And she said yes. And all of a sudden, there she was, living with us. and at first it was like this amazing thing. And then the reality hits, which is, here's a kid who has 16 years of unprocessed trauma and other things, in addition to being a teenager, that we were simply not equipped to handle. And thankfully we got a lot of support, and my wife is very savvy, and she's the one that's calm, cool, and collected. I'm the one that's just like, I'm on fire. Like, I'm an emotional wreck. But she really helped manage that. And over time, we just built this very, very strong attachment. And we realized that in order for her to set herself free from anything that has to do with being a kid in the system, a good option would be to adopt. And that's what we did. And once we adopted her, everything continued on as usual. And here we are, almost a decade later, and we have this complicated but very special relationship. And it's probably been the hardest. I mean, this is so cliche, but most rewarding thing that I've ever done.
I mean, what an incredible story. I mean, it's something that most people, in their early 30s are thinking about selfishly themselves, right? They're thinking about my career, what's the next phase? Am I, you guys are already married, but what does that look like for you guys to take on that type of a challenge is incredible. And I mean, I think most people would just be not able to do it. You said you had support? I mean, you're originally from Spain. Do you have family in the Bay Area? Does your wife have family? What was the support that allowed you to take on that challenge and not feel like it was just you and Tanya taking it on yourselves?
Yeah, this is where we have to give it up to the foster care system, is that any kid that's in the foster care system has what's called wraparound services, which is basically they get mental health, they get financial aid. There's a lot that goes into that, and with that, of course, there are therapists and counselors and social workers, and you name it. The you get a whole array of professionals. But we had a wonderful therapist that was working with our daughter at the time that was helping us. I mean, I got to the point where I was at a breaking point, and one day I was like, I'm leaving. I can't do this. I'm done. And I was about to just, leave my wife, leave our daughter, and say, okay, I'm starting over new. I just wanted to go to Spain and forget about everything that we had started. And thankfully, people like Mohammed, who was our therapist at the time, was able to kind of guide me through this. And this is where I wasn't kidding, that one of the things that got us into this was ignorance. Is we simply didn't know how complex it could be to navigate the emotions and complexities of somebody who has gone through such a hard upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we had that, and then as I said, my wife is very resourceful, so she just started reading a ton of books, started consulting with people. She met other foster parents who had adopted and fostered teenagers, and just learned what the path looked like. So she was able to guide us both, and I was really struggling at the time because I had just gotten to the point where I realized that although I had success in my career, I had gotten into relationships that I wasn't proud of. I had business relationships that I didn't like. I had brand deals and partnerships that I was saying yes to because I thought I had to. And as I was separating from my business partner, which was a huge financial hit on me. In addition, I was starting to end all my contracts with all my sponsors. I was also releasing my book, and so it was this whole thing where, in the back, my life was chaotic. At the forefront of my career, my business was definitely not thriving. It was crashing. It was in a rapid decline. And then at the same time, I was becoming a New York Times best-selling author. It was like, here, at forefront, everything is cool. In the back, it's like it's on fire. So yeah, it was a challenging time. But the fact that we got through it was because we had the people who were there to just encourage us to keep going. And then, I mean, although my parents don't live here, they live in Spain. My mom and my sisters were just super supportive, and yeah, they basically were my therapists. Through the whole process.
Thank you for sharing that story with us, man. It's some insight into some really complex situations that, life is all about. Life is not a straight line a lot of times, and I appreciate you kind of telling us a little bit about that background. Is fitness a part of her life at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. In fact, so when she had her kid 2 years ago, for a week, of course, she was having a hard time walking, but then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, she's just bounced back. Of course, she's young, but within a month, she was back to training. And it's interesting because no matter how challenging her life is, she still finds time to train. She goes to the gym. She's active. She can still do some acrobatics. I'm just like, this is incredible. It's incredible. Yeah, and she's just naturally inclined to pursue something around fitness, and she dances, and her son, our grandson, has taken on these genes for sure, because I mean the kid's running laps around here, and now in the kitchen we fold the runner rug that we have so he can jump hurdles, and then we have a basketball hoop that he grabs the ball and is like shooting all day. Like he wakes up and the first thing he does is like, hey, let's go shoot hoops in the kitchen.
I love it.
Hilarious.
I love it. I mean, to be born into that family of such fit parents is probably just a blessing. But you're now dealing with the diapers phase, and you don't have to deal with the maybe he's not sleeping over, but
he's get sleeping over.
Oh yeah, he's sleeping over.
50% of the time, so you're getting
the lack of
sleep.
sleep.
And
or
the
not sleeping
the
over.
dude's in our bed, and doing the H, and man,
our 2-year-old does the exact same thing. It's just kicking me in the face and punching my wife in the face the whole night,
all night,
back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you're getting the stages that you missed when you adopted. So.
Well, that's, what's so crazy is that's the thing that we realized, that when he was born, he started staying with us right away, because we were supporting Tanai during that process, which was very challenging too, as a single mother. And I was like, oh man, not sleeping is what really kills you. I mean, I was hallucinating the first night. I was like, we need to keep this thing alive. and I just remember like dozing off, and then I had this like hallucination where I had some like, I don't know, Native American shaman saying, hey, your baby is crying, and I woke up and I'm like, he is crying. Yeah, you trip out.
Yeah, Mike, this is something you haven't experienced yet as just an uncle, but
yeah, I haven't experienced it, but I feel like I've been so close with all of my friends that go through it, and as a compassionate empathizer,
you do better than
no,
most.
but it's also yeah, I mean, my wife, I was just with Dave, we were down in Miami for Wadapalooza, so while I was away, my wife was like, you know what, I'm gonna go hang out with my best friend, and her daughter is about 2.5 now, and she's a single mom, and after a week my wife was like, there is no way. She's like, no way we're doing that. She's like, we will help, we will watch, we will like open the door for anybody, but no. She's like, you don't sleep. I said, yeah, I mean, I haven't had, all the experiences, but I have absorbed them through story. And what they say, one of the wisest ways to learn is not through experience, but through observation. So I've observed, and I hear both of you, and I'm happy to help from my vantage point.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've digressed tremendously here, but I just want to ask I just want to add the last thing here is that there's something about, I felt the same way you felt, Mike. But there's something that happens when you have a kid where you're like, oh yeah, I don't mind if I have poop on my hands. Like, you're throwing up in my mouth. That's cool.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. There's a story here that I don't think my wife would appreciate me tell, but I'm going to tell it anyway. It's a story like that. We went on a long hike, and Jordan, who is not on the podcast today, but obviously a big part of the Power Monkey family, came to visit us out here in Portland, and we went on this beautiful hike along the Oregon coast. And my older daughter, who was 4 at the time, she had to go to the bathroom, and we were in the middle of the woods somewhere, and we were not remotely close to a bathroom. So she went out in the woods, and my wife had some wipes or something with her, and she wiped her and then kept the wipes in her pocket until we got home. And Jordan was like, did you have those in your pocket the whole time? So he was like, yeah, like I wasn't going to leave them out. We're going to throw them when we get home. And Jordan was like, just flabbergasted. Like that to him was enough to say, I'm never going to have a kid. Like, I will never have a kid if I have to carry around, poop wipes in my pocket. It's like, that's a daily occurrence as a parent. You just got to get used to it. That's part of the deal.
I mean, I want to connect the final dots on these interesting stories for everybody, because I know. So, Carl,
Bring it together, man.
Yeah, well, one of the to make this, I guess, make more sense, one of the things that we've embraced so much at our Power Monkey camp is something that Chad Vaughn actually started, which are campfire stories. And it's where campers and coaches and staff all have an opportunity to share their story. And man, the stories you hear are just the full spectrum of tragedy, heartbreak, humor, success, triumph, failure. It's unreal. And sometimes we've had coaches that have been with us for 10 years that we didn't know certain things about until they decided to tell their story one night. And it's so cool. And it adds the depth and the flavor that, life offers that, so often we don't see through the lens of social media or, quick superficial conversations and meetings. So one, you and I think your daughter have to come to camp and at the bare minimum take part in a campfire story, because I think you would love it. It would be a hit, and she would love camp. We have silks and hammocks and things that we hang up for some aerial stuff, and I'm sure
cool.
Sadie would enjoy a partner there. But to make the connection between baby poop and Spain. So when we were on a European coaching tour, Dave and Sadie had just had their first daughter. I think she was probably, what, Dave, 6 months ish.
Yeah.
Like maximum. And we did like a 6 to 8 week tour with a 6-month-old baby. So I was I was like the traveling Manny a little bit. I was just helping them help themselves figure out how to parent a newborn abroad. And Dave's wife, Sadie, was coaching a mobility class at one of our close friends' gyms in Madrid. And Dave was on maybe a call or something. So I had the baby and I was like, oh, great. Like, no problem with the whole trip. She's been awesome. And at some point she was only happy if she was sitting on me watching her mom. But what also made her happy was to just do every part of her business while she was sitting on me, watch her mom. And I couldn't move her. So I had, like, for an hour class, just me, her, and everything that was inside of her. And then, when Dave's wife came over, I was like, probably gonna have to do some changing here for both of us.
I love that you wouldn't stand up, Mike. I was just like,
I didn't want to ruin
go to the bathroom.
It was not gonna work.
I am sorry, Carl, that this devolved so much into the end being a poop-filled end of the podcast, but had to do more with parenting and recognizing the challenges that come along with it. I really appreciate the time, man. It's great chatting with you and catching up. I hate that it's taken so long for us to be able to at least see each other virtually, and I really do hope that we get a chance to hang out and catch up a little bit more in person sometime soon.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. And I guess with this grand poop finale is like, no matter what you do, you're always going to be in the shits, and you have to kind of learn how to work through it. And when you learn how to embrace the shit, that's when things really like start getting good for you, right?
Without a doubt.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure, and congrats on all the success, and let's keep going.
Absolutely. Are you cool with a couple quick questions before we get out of here? First one, I think, is an easy one. We just keep a tally on this one. What sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Gymnastics.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
That was way too quick, Carl. There was like not even.
Yeah, I was like, as soon as you said the W, I was like, no.
I'm right there with you. Number two, do you have any guests that you think would be great for us to have on the podcast? Someone you deal with or come across recently that would be a good interview?
Yeah, I think somebody who would be great would be Sunny Choi. She's a breaker that's set out to represent at the Olympics, and she has great insight. She used to be a gymnast, and now she does a lot of fitness and training and lifting to support her breaking, in addition to being one of the best breakers in the world. And
amazing.
Yeah, set out to do really well. So Sunny Choi.
Excellent. We'll have to reach out for that one.
I'll put you in contact with her.
That would be amazing. Thank you. We ask about books, but you already gave us a couple books that you've quoted and recommended. But anything recently that you're reading that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I just finished a book called Self-Improvement. It's a very cynical view on the self-improvement industry, but I think it makes a great point, which is that when you're in the self-improvement industry, whether it's through fitness, mental health, whatever it may be, it's easy to prey on the vulnerable. And the way that technology is injected into it, especially social media, we feel this need to constantly be sharing our vulnerabilities because our vulnerabilities are our strengths. But in reality, what we're doing is we're just putting ourselves in a position where we're kind of stagnating our development. And one of the ideas that comes from this book is that with the rise of technology and artificial intelligence, it's important to become a little bit more human and to actually utilize that which you're creating as the tool for self-development rather than self-development itself. And so it's an interesting book. It's called Self-Improvement.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll add that to the list. Appreciate that very much. And lastly, where can people find you? Do you have anything going on new they want people to know about, and where can they follow along?
Yeah, right now, freestyleconnection.com is the best way to just find me, and then all social media outlets. And I'm constantly working on different things. One of the things that I'm most excited about right now is actually my podcast, which I would love to have you as a guest. So we'll work on making that happen. But yeah, that's the place to find me. Nothing pressing coming up, but I am planning a few things, hopefully in person, in Europe later this year. So yeah, that will be announced once it's closed.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Carl. Really appreciate the time, man. Great to catch up and hear what you got going on. Really appreciate it. And for all the listeners out there, please be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Mike Service. On behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your hosts. I'm Dave Durante with my co-host, Mike Service. And until next time, thank you all for listening.